What's going on, guys? Today we are undeleting my Jeep spare tire. We have Rusty's off-road tire carrier with the upgraded hinges. We have their high lift mount and a license plate relocation bracket. We're also trying out some new lighting in the garage, hopefully make things brighter and easier to see in the video. And for those tight spots the light doesn't reach, we're going to be using this Milwaukee M18 Rover LED light. With all that said, let's go ahead and get started. All right, pump the brakes real quick. Before you go any further, make sure you have some anti-seize and a 25/64 inch drill bit. Very, very particular size drill bit that you're not going to have in your normal standard sets. In the directions, it points out the importance of using this exact drill bit size to drill the holes in the tailgate. So make sure you have this beforehand, and you won't have to wait the next day to go to the store when it's open to buy one, like some people in this particular video. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Before we get started with the install, we got to do some demolition here. First, we're going to remove this whole panel. First step for that, we're going to remove these T40 bolts. There's also a little T20 bolt here in the corner of the subwoofer enclosure. With those bolts out, we're going to start to remove this. It'll help to have a little trim panel removal tool. I'm going to go ahead and pop up the tail light bolt cover right here. Move that out of the way. And then we can kind of just work this in all around. Usually helps to pull out the seat belt piece first here. And we don't even really need this. It's kind of just all popped out. Before we tear this completely away, be sure to unplug the subwoofer. There'll be a little gray connector here. There we go. To cut down on the length of this video, I've gone ahead and removed my Mopar trail table here. Just less stuff to have to show you in the video, so I'm going to pry this thing off because we will need to get into the wiring behind here. We will need to remove the passenger side tail light. To do that, you'll find a plastic bolt right here. It takes a T40 Torx bit to release that. So we're going to get started on doing that and take care to not let the tail light drop out. Once we have the tail light removed, we're going to unclip the harness here, pull up on the red tab, and this takes a good bit of force to unseat this. And set aside for safekeeping. To install the hinges, we're going to need to remove these stickers here. Now we want to be able to reuse these, so what we're going to do is hit them with some heat, and hopefully they'll peel off nice and clean. And I'm just using a low heat. Before we start ripping the tailgate hinges out, we're going to take using some masking tape or whatever, a few strips along the tailgate so we know where the alignment is supposed to be. We're just going to put these strips flat across. Depending on what you have on your tailgate already, this part might be a little different for you. Since I have a spare tire delete, I am going to be just taking this delete kit off. This is the metal cloak kit. Now, if you have the OEM spare tire carrier, obviously this part's going to be a little bit different, but you get the gist. Be sure and save these bolts. You're going to reuse these. Of note, these little plastic washers on the bolts, you will not be reusing those. Now we're going to work on removing these hinge bolts. We're going to start on the exterior, then we're going to go inside the Jeep and unbolt them from there. Now, they recommend shimming your tailgate to prevent movement, and also why we have this tape here. So if we do get some movement, we will be able to see it and try to correct for it. I don't have any wood shims or anything, so I've jammed some cardboard all along the bottom of here. So hopefully that'll prevent any movement. The hinge bolts on your OEM JL are going to be T55 Torx. Now, my top ones are different because I had a CB mounted using this bracket and some double-sided bolts. So that's why mine are going to look different than yours. Let's go ahead and hopefully get these off. These suckers are in there really good. Well, the Milwaukee makes short work of that. And now for my top ones, we're going to have these bolts here. These are 3/4. Now relocated to the interior, we are going to take a 13mm socket and work on taking the hinge bolts out from the inside. With the OEM hinges out of the way, we're going to install these rubber hinge protectors on the edges, just like this. Depending on what size tire you're running, you're going to be using a different number of shims on just the upper hinge. Since I'm running a 37-inch tire, per this little chart they give you, I'll be running 1 shim. The heavier the tire, the fewer the shims. They do state that this is just meant to be a starting point, and you may have to adjust depending on the actual weight of your tire. Now, they also recommend taping the shim onto the hinge like this. That way it's not moving when you're trying to maneuver this into place. With the help of my lovely assistant, I'm going to hold the tire carrier in place while she puts the bolts through on the interior here.
Move it in further. Down. Down. or maybe up. No. No. Up. And you have to stick it in further. There we go.
With the tire carrier loosely installed, we're going to swing it so it's flush with the tailgate. You want to be sure and route your camera wire and your third brake light wire carefully through this little hole just to make sure you don't damage them. Now with the tire carrier flush, we're going to install the 8 factory bolts in the spare tire carrier, the original spare tire carrier locations here. Don't get these too tight because they will be coming out when it's time to drill over here. Now we're going to take 4 of the M10 by 1.5 millimeter by 40 millimeter bolts that came with the Rusty's installation hardware. We're going to install them in each of these holes. Be sure to put a washer on them. With all the bolts in the tire carrier, now we are going to mark and center punch our 4 holes for the strengthener plate over here. This part is technically optional, but they definitely recommend doing it, so I'm doing it. I've already drilled plenty of holes in this Jeep, I'm not concerned. With our 4 holes center punched, now we're going to remove all the hardware from this. Our 8 OEM bolts and these 4 M10s right here. And we're going to swing the carrier back out of the way. When you're doing this, take care not to rip your camera wire out of the hole. It's hard to see, but I do have my little center punches here for the 4 holes we're going to drill. I always recommend stepping up your bit size. Start small and then go up to the final size you need. I'm also going to use a drill block to help make sure it goes in just straight. So I'm going to go ahead and put this through here. And I'm going to go ahead and press the tip of my drill bit into the hole that it will be drilling. Alright, set my drill block so I'm going in straight, double check it, and drill. Just like that, a nice straight hole. We're going to do the same for each of these, and then we'll step up to our larger size. Alright, I think it's safe to say we can go up to our big size now. And the sheet metal you're drilling through is pretty thin, so the drill block isn't really necessary, so I'm not going to bother for this last step. Alright, we got our 4 holes drilled to size, and it doesn't mention doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to hit this with some touch-up paint before I thread in those nutserts. I've got these holes touched up with some paint. Now we're going to install our nutserts. They provide a little manual tool to do this with, but I have this Astro pneumatic nutsert installer, and honestly, you should just buy one of these. These things are awesome. All right, there we go. Once again, we're going to swing the tire carrier back into place, thread our camera and third brake light wiring through this hole. Careful not to damage anything. And now we are going to reinstall all our hardware. These 4 button cap screws are going to go in our newly drilled holes. The OEM hardware, and then our M10 bolts here. Now, I am having a little bit of difficulty making everything line up perfect, so what's worked for me is I put the 8 OEM bolts in, and then I've backed them back out, so they are in the holes, you know, threaded enough. So then what I'm doing is to get these holes I've drilled lined up, I'm just really yanking on this thing and having to, you know, push and lower it into place to get these to line up. Now once I have these in, I'm going to finish putting these in, and then I'm going to put the big M10 hinge bolts in. And this is going to be different for every install. Just based on how you drilled and whatnot, how everything lines up. So, good luck. You can do it. So I figured I'd let you know one of the little mishaps I've had here that you may have as well. I've stripped one of my nutserts, so I'm having to drill it out. So if you don't have these lined up perfectly, you know, this is something that can happen. Luckily, we should just be able to drill this out and put a new one in. I'm having to hold the back of the nutsert with these Kinetics pliers here, and I've just been stepping up the size. Get that drilled out. Well guys, little update. I failed at drilling out this nutsert. I drilled the hole too big, and now our nutserts will not fit. So I'm just taking the lazy way out, and I plugged this with one of the caps they give you, since mine are already capped from a previous adventure. So I have extra ones of these. I think 3 will be more than enough, considering most people don't even drill these out. If I want to go back later, I can always have somebody put in a larger nutsert that's still the same size. But for me, this is fine for now. It's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect. Now that I've got everything lined up, I'm going to go back and put some anti-seize on all of these bolts. I should have done it from the beginning, but trying to figure out this situation, I kind of forgot that step. But since you're watching this video, you won't forget this step. So I'm just going to pull these out one at a time and put some anti-seize on them. That way I don't have to go and try to maneuver this whole thing back into place. Now that we have anti-seize on everything, we can torque all of these bolts down. The big hinge bolts here are going to be 40 foot-pounds. The 8 OEM bolts are going to be 22 foot-pounds. And then these little bolts here are going to be 11 inch-pounds, though I don't think I'm going to bother with those. Moving back to the interior, we are going to thread on the supplied nuts to the back of these OEM bolts. And we're going to do this with a 13mm socket. We're going to put one of these on all 8 of these. And it doesn't give any torque specs, so we're just going to snug them down, not too tight. And while we're back here, we're also going to take our 4 nuts from the hinge bolts and put them on the backs where they are sticking out. Now we're going to begin to assemble the tire carrier components. We're going to take our third brake lights with the factory T25 bolts here, and you're going to install them into this bracket. Now the bracket, you can install this way, or so it's hanging below. And which way you install it will depend on your tire and wheel setup. So there's not a really good way to determine this ahead of time, so I'm just going to go with the downward route, and we will have to pull it off and adjust it later if need be. But we're going to go ahead and tighten these down. Now we're going to take our adjustable tire mounting bracket, and we're going to just loosely install it where we think we can get away with it. I think, based on some quick and dirty measurements, that I can get away with installing it on the lowest position. But obviously we may have to adjust this. So we're going to take these large bolts they have here. There's 9 of these, 9 nylock nuts, and 2 washers for each one. We're just going to install in the top for now, because that third brake light is going to install on the bottom. And once again, we are only going to loosely put these on. We're not going to tighten them down yet. Pretty neat. It says JL there. I'm assuming, for the JK, it'll have a JK. Now we're going to take our third brake light assembly and install it on the lower portion of this bracket with 2 more of these large bolts. And once again, we're not going to tighten these down yet. With this assembly loosely installed, we're going to take our wiring for our camera and our third brake light. We're going to pass it through this hole. Take care not to damage your camera wiring. Then we're going to reach down into here, and the third brake light will be routed through this hole in the bottom here, and then through this hole and plug in right here. Now we're going to take our camera and camera wire and just route it through here. Now we're going to take this assembly from our OEM spare tire carrier and we're going to pass our camera cord through this. And we're just going to set in place. We're going to grab our camera. We're going to plug it in. And now we're going to take our original little tiny Torx bolts that we took out of here. These are T8. And hopefully you haven't lost these tiny little bolts. Now we're going to take the portion of the bracket that has the metal camera tube on, and we're going to pick up this assembly, set this in place, and carefully align our lug plate into the tube here. And we're going to take, it's going to be 5 bolts altogether, 2 here. There's going to be 1 coming up through the bottom, and then 2 on the opposite side here. For now, I'm just going to go ahead and get 2 of them started just to hold this in place. And these are the same bolts you see right here. And I'm going to go ahead and throw that bottom one in as well. And once again, we don't want to tighten anything down yet. And now we are able to adjust this out as needed. Before we go any further adjusting this, we are going to use these supplied bolts, flathead bolts here, to secure the OEM lug plate into this assembly. And these are going to use a number 4 Allen key. Alright, so I want to give you an update on my failed nutsert installation here. The structural rigidity of this thing, I am not worried about in the least. 3 bolts right here is plenty as far as I'm concerned. However, cosmetically, this will aggravate me. So what I have decided to do is, you saw me put that plastic cover piece in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drill through that. I'm not even going to bother taking it out. And I'm going to put the bolt back through, and then I've simply got a large flat washer I'm going to put on the other side. So that will be pressing up against the back of the sheet metal. And then I got a little nylon insert nut that I'm going to put on the other end. And that will, it's going to honestly work just as well as the nutsert would. So I'm just going to drill that out. Easy enough. Throw this guy in there, and then Just going to get my Allen key here. And I guess it's a 10 millimeter. Nope, 13. All right, I'm gonna hop into the Jeep. Put the washer on the other side of this bolt. Thread on my nut. Now I'm just gonna crank this guy down. And I'll show you that from the inside as well. Right here. Next up, we're going to install a backing plate in here for some extra rigidity. And before we do that, we're going to insert 2 more bolts. We're going to take our leftover M10 bolts. These are the same ones that go into the hinges here. And we are going to insert those from the interior through this hole on top here and that square hole there on the bottom. And we have 2 aluminum spacers that are going to space these out so they're about the same as the little welded nuts here. And then we're going to put that backing plate on and then put on our nuts. So let's go to the inside and throw those in there. Now that we're here on the inside, we're going to take our M10 bolt and we're going to thread it through this top hole here. Easy enough. And we're going to go into the second one down here. See if I can get a view of that here. There you go. Now this one is a little bit tougher to go in. Originally I thought it wasn't going to go in at all, but if you just give it a whack or a nice solid push, it'll go in there. And so we're just going to go ahead and get my ratchet ready so I can actually reach in from the outside. Hopefully that'll stay put. And then we're going to attack it from the other side with the backing plate and the nuts. With our 2 new M10 bolts in place, we're going to take our aluminum spacers and put them from the tailgate side onto those 2 bolts. Then we're going to take our backing plate in this orientation with the cutout towards the front of the Jeep. We are going to position it in place. You may have to do a little wiggling to get them to line up all together. Alright, once we're on there, you're going to take your M10 nuts with the nylon inserts, and we're going to go ahead and put those, start threading those on to our M10 bolts. We're just going to get them nice and loosely on, so that our backing plate doesn't fall off. Now we're going to take our, I believe these are M8 nuts. There's going to be 6 of those, and we're going to put those on the 6 bolts that have been in here for a while now. Once again, we're just going to get those loosely on. There we go. With those on, we are going to do one last check to make sure the tailgate is aligned. Check your tape, make sure it is in the same place you put it. If all is good, then we can go ahead and start to tighten these down. I recommend starting with the 2 M10 bolts, as they will be the most difficult to reach. But what you're going to do is just reach your arm over, or if you have a buddy inside, they can hold the ratchet on the other side. But I'm going to start with this bottom one, get a ratchet on this, and then reaching over the tailgate, get a ratchet and socket on that bolt from inside, and we're going to snug these down. Now, they don't provide any torque specs, so just get them tight. Now that we have all our hinge hardware tightened down, we can finally remove the tape and open up the Jeep. I have the tailgate open, and we are now going to install the supplied tailgate tether. So to do that, we're going to remove the T40 Torx bolt right here, holding the factory tailgate limiter. And we are going to take our new tether. You'll notice it has a bent end and a flat end. We are going to run the flat end through so that when we put the bolt through, it's going to go through this first and then through this hole. So we're just going to thread this in from behind, twist it so it is the right way in place. We're going to reinstall that T40 Torx bolt. With the tailgate opened about 90 degrees, or about where the factory tailgate limiter stops it, we're going to take our new limiter strap here, run it underneath, and we're going to look at where it, basically where it stops. And we're going to mark this point here, and we're going to drill and put in another nutsert. So hopefully I will not ruin this one like I did that one on the tailgate. But this is going to help give us a little extra strength to the, heavier tailgate now when it's swinging open. So we're not relying solely on this factory limiting strap here. So this part, it's not going to matter if it's not perfectly dead center. You just want to eyeball it about here. And now, if you're wondering what this is just a grounding strap that I added for my previous CB setup, so you can just disregard that. I'm just going to kind of work around it. I may have to remove it when it's time to drill that hole. But I'm just going to center punch where I need to drill. And we're going to go ahead and drill this out. Once again, our goal size is this 25 by 64th drill bit here. They say you have to use this exact size for the nutsert to work correctly. So I'm going to work my way up just like I did on the others. I'm going to start with a tiny little bit and just step up there with a few bits in between. So we got our drill spot marked with the center punch. So let's go ahead and drill. Whoops. Once again, I'm going to be using my Astro Pneumatic nutsert tool. I'm going to push that in there and then carefully squeeze it into place. To give you an idea of how a nutsert works, I'll show you the back of that, if you can see that in there. When you pull the handles together, it pulls the nutsert so it kind of expands outward into the hole there. As you can see, with our nutsert in place, I'm going to give the tailgate a little bit of slack on the tether. And we're going to take one of our button head caps, the same ones that we installed, we drilled the 4 holes on the tailgate for. And once again, a 4mm Allen key. And we're going to tighten this in here. And I'm just going under my grounding strap that I've installed here. You likely won't have that right there. I'm just going to get that nice and tight. Assuming the tailgate's still in alignment after I throw this on there, we're getting mighty close to the finish line. I've gotten this bracket mostly tight, all the bolts in here. I've got this positioned in its just about its furthest out position. That way, once we get the 37 on here, we can kind of push it in and then tighten those bolts down to mark where we're going to keep it. So let's go ahead and throw this puppy on. All right, with my first test fit, I found that the tail light, where it was mounted on the bottom here, was contacting the very bottom of the wheel. So I have flipped this. We did have it down here, and we flipped it up, like I mentioned we may have to do in the beginning. So now that we have that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and try again. I've thrown some lug nuts into the spare here and given it a few test swings with the door. To show you how easily that closes. Maybe not one finger. One thumb will do it though. I'd say that works pretty well. I could probably play with the adjustment a little more, but for now, I'm a little bit done with this project. So I'm going to go ahead and, I like where the tire is, I'm going to go ahead and tighten down those bolts. And then I'm going to put in the 2 extra ones I was mentioning. And then we're going to get the spare tire back off of here, and we're going to torque everything down to 80 foot-pounds. With everything set where we want it, we're going to go ahead and torque all of this 1/2 inch hardware to 80 foot-pounds. We've got all our hardware torqued down, so now I'm going to work on reinstalling the interior of the tailgate and the sub panel. This is just going to be a reverse of what you did to pull it all out. So don't forget to reconnect your camera and third brake light wiring. I mentioned my ground wire for the CB earlier. I'm not going to bother running a CB currently. Haven't really used it in a while anyway, so I'm just going to zip tie this up so it's not rattling around. I'm also not going to bother with a rear or a license plate light. Yeah, technically you have to have it, but I find it hard to believe I'm going to get pulled over that. There's not a good way to put lights on this particular license plate bracket, so I may come up with another solution in the future, but for now I'm not going to worry about it. So I have everything buttoned up inside the Jeep. Before we throw the spare tire back on, I'm going to go ahead and install my high lift mount. This is really, really simple. They don't even include instructions for it, at least not that I've seen. I do wish they had some torque specs, but I'm just going to get them tight. But basically, you take out these hex cap bolts here that are right here, these four things, and the bottom of the high lift mount is going to bolt right into here, and then this triangle piece is going to bolt right up here. And so let's go ahead and get that bolted on, and you'll see pretty quickly how this works. You're just going to use, I believe this is a, let me look. This is a 7/32 Allen key. Of note, if you're running anything larger than a 38-inch tire, the instructions say this will not fit. The 38 will just be too big, and it'll take up the room that you would be devoting to this thing. We are running a 37 Nitto Ridge Grappler, so we should be fine. Alright, and that's all there is to it. Now, I wouldn't put a lot more weight than your high lift jack on there, but seems simple enough. You have these bolts coming through that are welded to the bottom plate here with some nuts. Put the foot of the jack through here, bolt it down, and then obviously this nicely designed bolt up here with a knob will be what goes through your standard bar. See that? Looks pretty nice. So the tire, the lower bump stop piece here, unfortunately is going to take a little bit of trial and error on your part. It comes with 3 different brackets here, and you can orient them pretty much however you want to. After fitting mine on several times, I'm going to be going with this little setup, and hopefully this will work out. But yeah, you might have to just come up with your own way after looking at your particular tire and where it's mounted on this thing to figure out exactly how you want this so that tire is flush against here. When it comes to the license plate bracket for this tire carrier, which is separate, it's pretty self-explanatory. This is going to clamp down on the camera tube. You're going to mount this with the provided hardware, and it's adjustable to wherever you want it. And then your license plate will go here. And you have plenty of hardware to do all that. So I'm going to get this set up. Alright guys, we are officially finished with this install. As you can see, this thing is strong. Let me show you how easy it is to open and close our door now with a very heavy 37-inch tire on the back. So just a couple quick notes if you opt to use the optional high lift jack mount. When you're opening the tire carrier with your high lift in place, take care not to sling your tire carrier open as hard as you can, because it will hit the tail light. Now, I have my tailgate tether set exactly where the instructions recommended it to be, right at about factory level. And at the farthest point it's out, it does not contact the tail light. There is like a half a millimeter between my high lift and the tail light. Now, if I swing this out, it's going to stretch the tether a little bit and it will contact that tail light. So if you are running your high lift mount and you have it mounted, just take care not to sling your high lift around. Another note, let me close this to show you. Just another thing to mention, the bolt and handle that came with my kit. This may just be mine and it might not be all of them, but once I unthreaded it, I could not get it back in. It was super tight. So I ended up putting some anti-seize on the bolt of this knob that I will take out here and show you. And put some anti-seize on there, and I really cranked it in there with a, actually used a C-clamp, pinched down on here to get some extra leverage on this thing. And I was able to turn it and clear out those threads. And after doing that a couple of times, now it threads in pretty easy. So I think the threads just needed to be cleaned up a little bit. But now it works like a charm. It's nice and tight and does exactly what it's supposed to do, hold my high lift in place. So you may or may not run into that, but if you do, just clear those threads out, use some anti-seize, have some patience, and it will work perfect. Another note regarding the high lift mount, the welded bolts in the bottom come with these two nylock insert nuts to tighten these down. So that is another thing you want to keep in mind if you're going off-road with your high lift mount and you have this bolted down. You obviously want to remember to bring either a 3/4 inch wrench, or if, like me, I keep a couple of adjustable wrenches in the Jeep toolkit. Keep a small and a large one of these, and this would obviously just work perfect for securing these or taking them off in the event that you need to use your high lift mount. Just another thing to keep in mind. Since I am running Rusty's trail bumper, it does not have a license plate bracket, which means I do need to use Rusty's tire carrier mounted bracket. It looks great and it's built well. It's just not a great design, just because you do have to have some tools to take it off in the event that you're getting your spare off. So that's not, ideal, but I can't really think of a better solution given my current setup. So if you are running this and you're using the hardware that comes with the kit, you'll just want to make sure and keep a 4mm Allen key and an 11mm socket or wrench to get that nut and this hex cap bolt off. One final note about this installation is that you may need to adjust it. This chart here, as the directions clearly state, is just a starting point. We went with one shim to start with based on the chart, but I found that no shims was a better option for me. I guess this is a heavier 37-inch tire, but I ended up taking the one shim off. I just removed the cover back here again and loosened all the hinge bolts and was able to just fish that shim out. And after that, I held the tailgate in place while my wife adjusted the bolts back in there. And we got it to where I got a good latch and there's no dropping or anything. So don't get frustrated. You may have to adjust the hinges. What you will not do is remove any of the bolts that you put through the tailgate into the tire carrier. Those all stay. You will only adjust the hinges. So that you're going to pop the tail light out again, take the nuts and that bracket, or that brace off, and then loosen up these bolts and adjust the tire carrier there. Or add or remove shims at that point. So don't get frustrated. Just know you got to get through it. Get your perfect fit, and you will be extremely happy with this tire carrier. I can't wait to get it off-road and just see how it handles. It's going to be great not having to load my spare tire in every time I'm going off-road again. So really excited. Hope you enjoyed the install. Hope it made you more comfortable with buying and installing this yourself. If you have any questions, leave a comment. I'll get back to you as quick as I can. Thanks again for watching. Have a good one.